Do you need some exhaust work done on your car or truck? Or maybe you even need a full exhaust system built for your muscle car or classic truck, but you don't want to pay an exhaust shop $2,000 or $3,000 to build it for you? Well, this video is for you. This is something you might be able to do yourself just with some real simple tools and a cheap Harbor Freight welder. Now right away you might be thinking, if this job requires welding, I can't do it. I don't have a welder, I don't know how to weld, it's not for me. Well, give me just 2 minutes here to try and change your mind on that. For beginners, I recommend a wire feed MIG welder. It's just got a wire that comes out the gun and you just pull the trigger. It's really that simple. You pull the trigger, the wire comes out and it welds. Simple as that. All right, so let's make a weld. And all I'm gonna do here is just aim and pull the trigger once. That's it. And there, we just made a weld. You want to make another one? Do the same thing right next to it. Now we made 2 welds. Let's do a couple more. And that's it. You just go all the way around that pipe that same way, one little weld at a time, and you weld the whole pipe together. So literally anyone can do this. You can learn to weld in 30 seconds. Now Harbor Freight's got a whole bunch of MIG welders, and look at the cheapest one, 150 bucks. And look at how many reviews. 4,000 positive reviews on that thing. I don't have this welder, but I know people who do, and they say it works just fine. And that's all you need to start out. Now most headers come with a flange like this, a bolt-on flange with a gasket, and I hate those. I'm going to cut that off. And the reason is I like to go with V-bands. A V-band clamp, if you've never seen one, looks like this. It's got 2 parts. There's a groove on one side and a ridge on the other side, and they fit together. So they fit together very securely, and they're real tight. There's no leaks. And there's a clamp. They just go inside this clamp, and the clamp holds them together like that. So that's a nice tight seal, and it doesn't distort the pipe at all, and there's no bolts or gaskets or any of that nonsense to worry about. So whenever I build turbo systems, I always use V-bands, and so does pretty much everybody else in the world. The other reason is, what if I don't want a joint right there? What if my packaging is too tight and I don't want bolts and a joint right there? What if I want a piece of pipe to come down like that and I want a joint down further? That's the other reason. So I always cut that off, make the pipe where I want it, put the joint where I want it, and use a V-band for the joint. 3-inch stainless steel exhaust tubing kit from eBay. One of the best things about these pipe kits is these are all mandrel bends. A mandrel bend means the diameter of the pipe doesn't change all the way through the whole bend. Now exhaust shops a lot of times just stock straight pipes. And in order to make bends, they put a straight piece of pipe in a machine and they kind of crush it and bend it and distort it and put kinks in it in order to make a bend. Now those crushed sections can have the inner diameter of the pipe reduced by up to 20%. So that can restrict your flow quite a bit. So I always try to use mandrel bends for my whole exhaust system so I don't have any restrictions anywhere. All right, so I cut and kind of mocked up an extension. It's about a 45-degree angle on this header, about right where I thought it needed to go. But I forgot about one thing. This transfer case has a support rod that goes all the way up to the transmission. This big bar starts right here at these 2 bolts and goes all the way up there. So you can see the way I have this mocked up right now, that's not going to quite fit through there. So I'm going to have to cut that extension off of the header, modify it a little bit and make it go over to the right and a little higher. Here's that header, and you can see I only put this piece on with a couple of tack welds just for mock-up purposes. So now I can just zip those 2 tack welds off and this will come apart and I can recut it at a different angle. You want to make sure you don't put too much weld on these when you're just mocking things up, otherwise it'll make it a real pain. Try to get it back apart again if you need to. Now it's important to remember when you're making your exhaust parts, try to make the header piece as small as possible. In other words, don't weld a whole bunch of pipe onto this, because remember, you still need to be able to fish this down through there to be able to take it on and off. And it can be a pretty tight fit. So the more crap you weld onto the end of this header, the harder it's going to be to snake it in and out of there. So I've got that part up there clearing just exactly right on both left and right side, and it's got good spacing up and down. So now I'm working on making a couple of pieces to go from the X pipe kind of up around the transfer case. Like that. And that pipe will point forward. I'll be able to make a straight section that connects up with the other pipe. So now here's kind of a neat trick that I do all the time. When you're trying to make your exhaust go around an obstacle, one thing that works a lot of the time is take one of these U pipes, cut it right down the middle, then you can take one half, flip it around, and go like that. And then obviously, depending on your needs, you can adjust this to all different angles. I want to put an X pipe in the system here. They do improve the flow a little bit, but mostly, more than that, they kind of tame down the raspiness of an exhaust. They just give it more of a smooth, mellow tone. But there's not a whole lot of room here. Look, you got the engine there and then the transmission. I don't want to block the transmission pan if that ever has to come down. Now we've got the transfer case and this big cross member. So the only place it could really go is kind of right behind the transfer case here. We've got the X pipe kind of mocked up where it's going to go. It's behind the transfer case. I got enough clearance between the tail shaft of the transfer case and the drive shaft coming down here. It's not a ton, but it should be enough. And then I've got it centered. So that's about where it's going to live. Now we just got to start making the pipes to connect it up. Here's what it's looking like so far. We got our X pipe back here, and on this side we kind of go, we swoop up and around the transfer case, and we got that thing, that pipe pointed at the other pipe up front coming off the header. And then on this side, same thing, but instead of such a steep swoop up, it's more of a gentle swoop up. And then about a 45-degree angle, and we're pointing right at that other pipe up front now. When it comes to turning complex corners, it's basically a trial and error process. You just have to make a small cut, test fit, make another small cut, test fit, and just keep shaving small pieces off one at a time until you get exactly the right type of angle that you need. Now I do have a really nice carbide chop saw, a metal saw. This thing is awesome. It'll cut through steel just like butter. Well, there's only one problem with it. The blade on this thing is like $100, and stainless steel just destroys these blades. So I went to Harbor Freight and I got one of these little portable band saws, and the blade on this thing is $17 for two of them. So we're gonna give this a shot instead. Boy, is that nice. Perfect clean cut, no sparks, and cheap blades. I want to show you something. I get a lot of pieces cut off as I'm mocking things up here. Sometimes I get a real sharp one like this. Now this is garbage, but check this out. If I take a needle nose pliers, I can just bend that around in a circle like that before I throw it in the garbage. Now, why would I do that? Well, because I don't want some seagull or raccoon or somebody walking around in the landfill to get a really sharp thing stabbed in their foot. So I just take a second, bend them over, now I can throw it away. And now on this joint, these two pieces of pipe don't match perfectly. I've got a little bit of a gap to fill. And the way I do that is I start on one side and just make a little bead, and then I hit it again to build it out to bridge the gap. And then for the rest of this, I'm just gonna touch right in the center of that puddle, and it'll build up a bead on top of that, and then I'll touch the center again, and the center again, and the center again. So I'm basically just building upon this puddle all the way up here. I'm not going from one side to the other. I'm just touching right in the center, and that's gonna build that bead across the center. The MIG welder is pretty easy, but the one thing that kind of sucks about it is it spits and spatters a lot. So you get a lot of these little dots that kind of weld themselves to your metal that you have to grind off later. So for that reason, if you want your welds to look nice, you kind of want to try to mask off the areas around the weld as much as possible. You can use aluminum tape for that, kind of stuff that you use for doors and windows. You put a new window in your house. I also use these are some fireproof mats. I think they're just fireproof felt mats. They're pretty cheap. You can buy them anywhere. And that's just all those sparks and molten metal that fly off. They'll hit the mats and the tape, and they won't stick, so you won't have to grind them off later. All right, this section is done. It's all welded up. This is the X-pipe section. Comes down off the headers. You can see I use these little flex sections where I attach to the header, and that'll just give the whole exhaust a little bit of flexibility. It's not so rigid because the motor vibrates around in there, and all this exhaust is going to vibrate around. You got to have something that absorbs that vibration. So I always use these flex sections. And I don't think I want to make this any longer because I want this piece to be removable. I've got V-band clamps up on this end, so I can easily remove those anytime I want. And I'll probably put clamps back here. That way this whole section will be easily removable. You don't want to have too much length of your exhaust welded together because then it's impossible to service it if you ever need to. So my welds aren't perfect. They're all right for stainless because stainless is pretty hard to weld. But I think I'm going to hit these with my little sander and just smooth them out a little bit. And then I'll repolish them. And this should look pretty nice. And I just used a buffer with a kind of a hard cloth wheel on it and the brown buffing compound. And then to get the residue from this off, I just kind of rubbed some mother's polish on there. And it's just light polish to get this residue off. All right, after a little sanding and polishing, this is what those welds look like after they've been polished out a little bit. They're far from perfect, but not too bad. It's stainless, so even the weld itself polishes. And this X-pipe, I had this X-pipe in a box of exhaust parts out back. Actually, I don't think it's stainless steel. I think it's aluminized mild steel. So I'm probably gonna just hit that with some gray engine paint, high temp engine paint. All right, I just finished up welding the rest of the seams on this header. And I put an O2 bung in there so I can run a wideband O2 sensor. To put the resonators and the mufflers on, I'm going to clamp those on because I want to be able to remove them and replace them if I ever need to. I'm going to use this style clamp. This is a 3-inch clamp, but it actually has one section that's a little bigger than 3 inches. And that's because most of these exhaust pipes have a little bit bigger section so that you can slip it over another pipe and join it together. So the wide part goes in the wide section here, and then the narrow part goes over the smaller pipe, like that. I like using these pipes, race flow mufflers. I've had them on a couple cars. I just like the way they sound. They give a kind of a deep, mellow rumble without any raspiness, and they're not overly loud and obnoxious. But they're stainless steel but not polished. So I'm going to polish them up. So far we've got the headers on. Those go into a couple of flex joints. And then we got some piping that goes up and around the transfer case. And then the X pipe. And then the resonators. And then that goes into the mufflers back there. So now all we need to make is some tailpipes. You pick whatever mufflers you want to give it the sound you want. The resonators take out the drone frequencies so you don't get any drone on the inside of the car. And the clamps make it so I can swap either one of them out if I don't like them. Nothing's welded back here. Got the mufflers here, and I'm going to be making tailpipes that come back here. But I need something to hang these hangers from, to attach to the tailpipe. So I need some kind of a cross member in here so I can put a hanger on each side. This truck had this weird bracket. It was riveted to the frame right there, and it sticks out like this. And I think that's the brake line bracket. So the steel brake line comes down out of the frame and attaches to this top part, and then the rubber line goes down to the differential. Now why they put that on the passenger side, I have no idea. I would just run it on the driver's side since that's the side that the master cylinder is on. But by drilling that out, I've got 2 holes here now. So I removed that bracket and I just made a bar that goes across with 2 bolts that can reuse those same holes. I drilled holes on the other side too. Now I have a nice bar that I can hang exhaust brackets from. So that's going to work cool. And also I can reuse this same bracket for the brake lines. I'm just going to weld it on about right here. And now my steel brake line can come back on the driver's side, come down, attach to this bracket, and then a rubber line can go down to the diff. So I'll still be using this bracket, just on the opposite side. Here's what that little support bar looks like. I've got it painted and bolted up, and I got a couple exhaust brackets, exhaust hangers on it. So that just goes right across. And then I've got that brake bracket welded to it also. So we'll be able to reuse that when it's time to run the brake lines. So this exhaust is pretty much done. Got it all the way from the front to the back, and then we've got sections here, and then I've got the tailpipe sections just pointed out to the back. I don't have these welded yet or clamped because I'm not quite sure where I want them to go yet. I don't have the wheels on, and I don't have the bed of the truck on, so I'm not sure how high or low they need to go. So I'm gonna leave those where they are so they'll be adjustable, and then once I get the bed of the truck and the tires on, I'll be able to fine tune where those exit. But otherwise, that's it. This exhaust is a wrap. Let's take a look at the parts list that went into this exhaust build. So the pipe kit I got from eBay, that was $130, but you can get that from Amazon or Summit. There's lots of places that sell these pipe kits, and I went with stainless steel. I think if you went with mild steel, it'd be cheaper. The V-bands, 2-pack, $37. Flex pipe, 2-pack, $23. Hangers, 4-pack, $33. The clamps are $25 for 2. And I bought 4 sets, so that was $100. Resonators, 39 times 2 is 78. Mufflers, 85 times 2, 170. So my total for this full exhaust system, everything after the headers, obviously, it was $571. So I'm sure if you went with some cheaper mufflers and didn't do the resonators, there's ways to save money here, but this is what I chose to do for my setup. Next, I'm going to be working on making custom brackets underneath these gas tank holders to mount these guys, step bars. I don't like the little single step that a lot of people put hanging down from there. I want these bars on there, but I got to make custom brackets for it. So there'll be a video coming up when I get that done. All right, that's it for the exhaust. Hopefully this helps some of you see that you can probably do this yourself. It's not that hard. Just got to have a welder. All right, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.